We're working on that too.
We're
Yeah.
ready.
Okay, perfect. We will, Jess is gonna be running like 10 different spots here,
Yeah,
but
give me just 1 second. I'm admitting everyone to the meeting as we speak.
perfect.
We do have 8 folks.
8 online.
Great.
Welcome, folks.
Okay, and I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we'll start off with a roll call. McKee here, Schultz.
Here.
Bottoма.
Present.
Behrenkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Perfect. We'll now go into the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd like to stand and join.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, agenda approval. I know we have a couple changes and additions.
We have a couple of changes in addition. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have Senator Rimmer here to give us an update under 6A. On your dais, there's a minor clerical error on the seasonal employee pay. It's at 1 and 2 times pay, and it was to be 2 times pay. So I apologize.
I was wondering what that was, okay.
Yep, so that was just a clerical error on that. We have on your dais as well, the street lighting map that Kevin shared this week. And then we do have the stanchion bar here to request an extended time for the Hamlin Rodeo.
Perfect. Okay, any changes from council? I would propose maybe we move 10B ahead of 10A, just because 10A is one of those items that we don't know exactly how long it could take, and people might not be as interested.
I'd second that if you
Okay.
want a second.
Perfect. Well, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended with the additions from Jess and the reordering of 10B and A.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Could we even move it up in front of unfinished business?
Yeah, we
Just-
could,
Certainly good.
yeah, let's, want to make a motion to amend the agenda to move 10, the relocated 10B ahead of unfinished business?
I'll make that motion.
Did we already vote on the first one though?
Yeah, but now we're just
Make
re-amending the
another
agenda.
You're
Amending the
friendly
amendment.
We're just doing another motion.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And someone remind me at the time, because I will forget. Thank you. Okay, commission representatives. Not sure planning-wise, there's not really anything planning anyway.
Do not have a planning
Okay.
They were just here.
representative.
There's no planning business.
We don't
And Michelle, I think,
currently-
is
and
Parks and
Michelle
Trails
is our
today.
Parks and
Perfect.
Trails.
Sounds good. On to open forum.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would note, staff did receive a letter from someone in the community, and we do have it on the dais. Staff will go ahead and reach out to them with a formal response from the you all know about
Sounds
that. But there was some comments and concerns related to a business.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a
Yeah.
question quick? Isn't there already a look at landscape plans and all of that stuff, and they aren't complete
There,
for that property?
that property is still working on their landscape.
Okay.
They'll have to finish bringing that in, but the lighting as shown is actually compliant with our city standards for lighting.
Do we think the landscape, when complete, would mitigate that at all?
The landscape should, when complete, should mitigate some of the concerns.
But not all of them?
Right now, they have an 8-foot fence. The request is for a 30-foot fence, which isn't
That's very tall.
30-foot high fence?
a 30-foot high fence.
Big fence.
Like I
So-
said.
Maybe that's something to point out,
smaller
is
than
that
some of
the
stone
landscaping
walls.
isn't complete, and when it
Along the
is,
interstates.
that should help, and then maybe that's where we have the discussion
30
from there.
So we'll respond. I just wanted to let you know that we did receive that.
Thanks.
Okay,
But
on to open forum.
as far as open forum, anyone in the public, if you'd want, or anyone in the audience or joining us virtually, can either come to the podium if you're in person, state your name and address. Otherwise, if you're joining us virtually, you can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. And this one is on the looks like anyone's raising their hand virtually.
Okay. Then we will go on to, I'm sorry, almost skipped over presentations. We have Senator Limmer here today to talk to us. We appreciate you making time to come visit. Thanks, Dean.
We keep our costs down here.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think so.
Oh, yes.
Your voice doesn't sound any different.
I don't need a
I don't think this is necessarily working, but I think you can hear me from here. And I just wanted to introduce myself. As you know, we had a redistricting map change this past year. Every 10 years, the entire country goes through redistricting. We use our census data to measure population growth or subtraction in certain communities, and Minnesota was no different than anywhere else. Previously, I represented all of Maple Grove, Rogers, Dayton, and the city of Osceola. Now the district maps have changed. I now represent 90% of Maple Grove, but the district now includes Corcoran, Greenfield, Independence, Medina, and of course Maple Plain and Loretto, that's surrounded by Medina. And so a different area. Some of the areas I've represented before, earlier than the previous decade. And Corcoran was one of them. And quite honestly, I'm glad to get Corcoran back. I love the western part of Hennepin County, and it has unique issues, especially as you're anticipating growth. Not everybody likes growth, and they don't necessarily like new developments as they look to the east and look at Maple Grove. Nevertheless, I want you to know that I will help in whatever you choose to do. Quite honestly, being a realtor, I probably should say I love development, but to tell you the truth, I love wide open spaces and I love nature, and I think that's a value to be protected, and working on balance between how we integrate people as well as wildlife and wide open spaces. One of the areas that I've been concentrating in is the Highway 55 corridor. There's a coalition group meeting. I've been involved in those before. Highway 94 has a very active coalition for that freeway, to widen it, to develop it. The goal is 3 lanes both ways all the way up to St. Cloud. And we're moving in that direction. Most of that activity has been around Rogers up to Monticello and down to Maple Grove. Most important thing that I try to instigate is, no matter who you are in the lineup of development, Maple Grove, it seems like MnDOT is moving it up from Maple Grove and up the freeway. The first legs have been going all the way up to Monticello. But as the freeway develops, it's vitally important to keep people in Maple Grove, the cities of Maple Grove, part of that coalition. When you have a coalition, you have a voting bloc in the legislature. And it's vitally important to hold that all the way up through the time that that development is finished. And Highway 55 is no different. I'm anxious to get involved in that. Right after election, I went on a vacation with my wife, so I missed that first meeting. But I'm looking forward to the next one when we get together. And there's a few things that I've learned from the previous coalition, and it seems like everybody's a coalition these days. But it's important to keep that unity. Because once you keep the unity, then you're a serious influence in the legislature. I've been going around all of these cities that are new to our district, and I just visited last night with Loretto and Greenfield. Portland's on my list tonight. Maple Plain will be a couple weeks later. And, well, people in Maple Grove know me enough. They may not even want to hear from me. But nevertheless, It's vitally important to keep that connection between cities and those that represent you in the legislature. And I'm here to help. I'm here to, anything my office can offer the city, I'm more than willing to help you with the direction you want to go. That's your choice, not mine. I believe in small government. I believe in the limitations of our Constitution, both the United States and Minnesota Constitution. I use the Constitution as a basic guide to give you direction on how far government should go. Constitutions create parameters more than they create anything else. And it's vitally important to understand that balance and give the public as much freedom as possible without having a dictate from government. That's always a challenge, especially in modern days. But, Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you.
Likewise.
I had your police chief come down to the legislature.
I saw
giving
that.
a little influence, giving us wisdom, anyway. And so, it's good. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I'm the ranking member there. I served 6 years prior to that as the chairman of that committee. And so law enforcement and public safety is vitally important, and it's the role of that committee to understand and steer some of that policy development. It's been a major debate in the last few years, how law enforcement should react to whatever emergencies there are. There's questions of accountability and discipline, but there's also a question of how do we write bills, and what do we expect from our courts? What do we expect from our public prosecutors? And lately, I'll tell you, I'm not impressed. And I think our public prosecutors should be following the law and prosecuting criminals. They seem to have a different approach to it now. And the courts seem to be reinventing the role that we've established on sentencing guidelines. We put that into our laws, and they seem to be going in a different direction. They seem to be going, especially in Hennepin and Ramsey, they're going softer on criminal penalties. And quite honestly, I think we're reaping a whirlwind. And that isn't going to go away until we start following the law and establishment of criminal sentencing. I can go on different issues, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to overstay my welcome. But if anyone has any questions, I'll open it up real quick.
Any questions for Senator Limmer?
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question?
Sure.
I don't have a whole lot of hope for this legislative session for our town. I don't know if you know this or not, we're the safest town in Minnesota, so our police do a good job, and we do not, a lot of our cases do not go prosecuted. And I'm wondering if you get a sense of any, because Democrats control everything in Minnesota, are there any agreements that we might have with some of the Democrats on having crime be taken a little more seriously than it is currently, or is that a dead issue? And then we have, they passed a bonding bill for 610 to go into Maple Grove there. And that's just gonna dump a ton of traffic onto 30. And 30 goes, gets really skinny really fast. And it's a county road, and the county is building light rail and not roads. Is there any hope for what's gonna actually happen once 610 dumps all the traffic onto 30 that goes through our town?
Right now, County Road, or Highway 610, there's only one finish-up bonding request, and that's for ramps going eastbound on 94. And that's kind of an unfinished leg on 610. But it does mean that where it dumps out on that corner of County Road 30, it's going to be a problem for you all, because there doesn't seem to be any sympathy for the city of Corcoran right now. When I was out campaigning and going along County Road 30, I happened to be out there at about 6, 7 o'clock at night, and it is a constant stream of cars.
Mhm.
And they're not necessarily following the speed limit either. It was you know, we'd occasionally put up the campaign sign in a voter's yard, and it almost took your life that risking it to put up a little campaign sign. And you weren't on that road surface or on the shoulder of the road that long either.
Right.
You know, grab a sign, grab a counter, and step away from the road. That's about how long you have time, and you don't want to spend any more time on that shoulder. Especially during that time of day, people along that road, your constituents were complaining to me. One item is that the mailboxes are on the north side of the road, and the whole houses are on the south side of the road. And they're seriously concerned that someone's going to get whacked on the road by a car. So you may want to visit with those folks up there. At least
Yeah.
that's one
Appreciate
message
it.
that I'll relay onto you all. We can try and help you with different ideas. If you want MnDOT to come out and analyze, we can urge them to do that. Maybe that's not the best thing, but, and it depends on your city plan as well. But going back to your other question about taking crime seriously, those of us in the new minority right now are doing everything we can to bring the attention of crime and the effective administration of that crime, bringing people to justice as loud as we can. And session's only been around now for about a month. And we're hoping they listen. They didn't listen before, and they're not. I'm on that committee, and it seems like it's a party line vote on all of the decisions that have come up so far. We have other ways of getting our message out. We bring it to the people, we bring it to news media. I was just on Channel 5 News because I wanted to increase an enhanced penalty for carjacking. Carjacking is a very popular thing for especially young people. But when right now it's categorized as robbery in the state of Minnesota. When you put a gun in someone's face and say, I want to take your car, well, they don't ask, they just say, get out of the car, I'm taking your car. That's stepping over the line of simple robbery, and now it's an assault with a dangerous weapon, and that should deserve an enhanced penalty in a prison time. And that got good media coverage, and I'm getting a lot of people responding all over the state to that message. So those are the things that we're going to drive right into the majority and get them to understand that the public really wants enforcement. So it's a long battle ahead, but we aren't shying away from it.
Glad to hear it. We appreciate you fighting for that type of stuff. It is incredibly important. Thank you so much. Anything else for Senator Limmer?
On the crime front, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I agree. One challenge in working with the opposition party is they don't share necessarily the same consequences views. When I was in debate in high school, we studied juvenile justice and juvenile crime. And we learned about systems in place in Massachusetts where they focus heavily on restorative justice, and especially for juveniles, where we seem to have a lot of our carjacking issues, and a lot of the crime that I'm hearing about is juvenile committed or juvenile related. They have a system that focuses primarily on restoration. So there's consequence, but it's not retributive consequence. And it has been highly effective. Their crime rates for juveniles are about half of what they are in Minnesota, at least in 2019 when I had the latest data. Do you think it's possible to partner with the opposition to implement something that maybe wouldn't be prison term, but could we create an infrastructure to treat these juveniles in a way that can stop them from becoming hardened criminals over their lives?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's something that we're already doing in the state of Minnesota. And there is agreement between both major political parties on behalf of juvenile crime. Now, there are some juveniles, we call them EJJ, Extended Juvenile Jurisdiction. These are the kids that have the maturity level that they should know what they're doing is a serious assault or safety issue against the public. I'll give you one example, drive-by shooting. If a kid's at 16 or 17 years old we're pretty safe to assume he's mature enough to know what he's doing, and that act is going to cause serious injury to the victim. Oftentimes, it's not even a targeted shoot, it's driving by a sidewalk and they riddle the sidewalk with bullets. Those types of individuals, we will put into incarceration. But everything below that, we have a host of other consequences other than a prison term. The state or the county of Hennepin and Ramsey, they got rid of their juvenile detention centers. They mowed them down. And now they're coming back and saying, oops, we were a little premature in doing that. Now they're coming back to all of the taxpayers in the state and asking all of the taxpayers to build new ones. I made statements saying, don't tear them down yet, pause on that, do your experiment, but if you need it, let's not tear the buildings down so we're forced to rebuild something like that. We haven't decided whether we're gonna give money to Hennepin or Ramsey at this time. Unfortunately, where do you put those kids now? They're going back into foster homes or back home, sometimes with a single mom, and we're getting phone calls saying, you've got to do something about this kid of mine, he threatens to kill me. And so there are some very serious offenders. But for the most part, we try to get them into counseling sessions, sometimes therapy. There's other things involved in their life, like drug involvement. It's not just or a broken home. I was a county correction officer at the county workhouse way back in the early 80s for about 4 or 5 years right out of college. And my experience has been, I would say 85 to 90% of the adult felons that would have been in that facility come from a broken or an abusive home. And what do? We spend very little money up front on that, but we spend tons of money in corrections, drug treatment, and other things in their upper teens. And then they're locked into that crime pattern. The last thing we ever want to do is put a juvenile in an adult correction facility. That has never done well. There were studies in Massachusetts at the Kennedy School that claimed that all that does is, it's like sending a kid to crime college, and they learn more and more. And believe me, I've heard the stories being a correction officer up on the 3rd tier of the cell block, where at nighttime, the inmates will talk to one another and they'll teach each other how to perfect a crime against our innocent citizens. And so prisons aren't always the best place. Minnesota reserves prisons for the worst of the worst, the ones that are the threat to individuals. We try to reroute them elsewhere. We're the second lowest incarceration state in the country, and like a lot of prisons hold people that are addicted to drugs. Those people don't need prison, they need treatment. But you need to have a sentence to hold over them to get them into treatment. And we've been pretty successful with that, but there's still a very stubborn recidivism rate that never really goes away. And nor will it. We shouldn't expect it to go away. It's about at 38% at any given time. I can continue answering questions all night long, but I know you have business to take care of.
Like I said, we really appreciate it, and I feel like you guys could have a in-depth conversation.
That was wonderful.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Welcome to Corcoran.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Glad to work with you.
I think you get a sense of what the general public concern is out in the community. I think you got a good handle on that. And I echo what John and others are saying. I've watched some of those committee meetings on TV, and it's like the one party won't even listen to what the other parties are putting forward, and it's sad.
Yeah.
So,
We're trying to get them to listen, and I think it really takes the public at this point to call their legislators. I think if you like what I'm doing, you don't have to call me. You can encourage me, though, I always love that. But if you have friends, relatives in other parts of the state, that you should convince them to call into the legislature. We do listen, and we do pay attention when constituents call. So, that's the way the system is supposed to work, and it does work when everyone is involved. So feel free to give me a call anytime.
That's good.
Thank you.
You've been doing this a long time.
Most
And
tenured in the
everyone-
state, I believe.
What's that?
Most tenured
Most
person in
tenured
the
in the
legislature,
state.
aren't you?
I'm the longest.
Pretty close.
Serving Republican
There you
Okay.
go.
in the state.
Gotcha.
And I've said this to many people in the past, if it was easy, somebody else would be doing it. So thank you for what you do,
Thank you.
very much.
Appreciate that. All right, I'll take you out of here.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have a great
again.
evening.
Alrighty, on to consent, which consists of 7A through 7I. What?
It's not beer, but.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yes.
it's like, did I screw something up? Thank
I
you.
got one.
I got one, I'm good.
Thank you.
7A through 7I for
Okay.
consent. Does anyone want to pull anything?
Can we pull 7H and 7I, please?
7H and 7I. Okay, anything else? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through G.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 7H, Alan.
With regards to 7H, do you have any information you could share with us about what the total costs were and where we're sitting with that, if this is the last payment?
Sure, thank you, Counselor Schultz and Mayor and Council. We were projecting an overage in, when we approved our last change order of $16,155. The final contract, the amount in front of you today for the final pay request is just the final amount of the contract, so it's nothing over what we had spent previously. So the total contract, or the total cost of the project was $742,655.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one more thing
Yeah.
on that?
Sure.
Doesn't include the audio visual in this chambers. We've got audio issues almost every time as far as the online stuff. Is there something that somebody can look at to see if we can get that solar a little bit more?
We will, we have a email into our group that does the systems here, and so we'll be working on
Okay.
on getting that fixed. And that was actually a separate, a slightly separate project, but.
All right, thanks.
Okay, anything else on that?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and 7I, Ellen, as well.
So 7I, I asked staff for information with regards to what the actual corridor development would look like, and see that we got something here from the consultant talking about.
I thank you, Counselor. I did provide I gave you a copy because you had asked the question, so I
Oh,
do
okay.
have a copy of, that you asked the question specifically of transit related to the project. And if you'd like, I can speak to what information they provided.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
So we did have, I did receive a update from Highway 55 Coalition related to the Corridors of Commerce grant. And in the application that they have noted for the Corridors of Commerce project, they outline that bus rapid transit would be, Highway 55 is identified as a strong potential for bus rapid transit in the future. It does not mean that it's being used at this time, but it is being planned for a potential in the future, as well as they are looking at a park and ride facility. So those would be the two things related to transit that are currently in the plan.
Park and ride, is that specifically in Corcoran? or-
It is not specifically in Corcoran. No, it's just along the corridor.
Okay. All right, I will make a motion to approve the supporting order.
Sounds good. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. On to the reconfigured 10B, which, let's do a public comment opportunity in case there's anyone online who'd like to speak. Otherwise, we'll go into it.
Who's in the audience or anyone online can press *9 if you're joining us virtually, and if you're on a phone. Otherwise, if you're on a different electronic device, you can press reactions and raise your hand. Mayor and council, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Perfect. Let's go into 10B.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and council. We did receive a request from the Stanchion for an extended hours noise hour request to have noise to play music outside until 12:30 a.m. on the dates of the Hamel Rodeo weekend, which would be July 7th and 8th. Last year, the city approved a similar request to allow music until midnight. In the past, most of our requests for noise waivers have gone till midnight, so this would be a slight deviation from that. But Christy is here to speak to any particular questions that you might have. And Matt and I did look up a little bit of information related to noise complaints.
Perfect. Yeah, if you guys would like to come up. If you want to, no pressure if you don't.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name's Christy, and I own the stanchion down the street. And I am here today to talk about a little bit about what happened last year, and then what I would like to see happen this year, if I can do that.
Sure.
So last year, I worked closely with the police department and St. Thomas Church and the neighbors. I'm fortunate enough to have not very many neighbors. It's mostly industrial. So with that being said, we decided that we were going to have a band just one night. It was our first year doing it. We wanted to see how it would work out. We wanted to see if we had enough manpower. So anyways, so we had a tent set up on Thursday, and then the tent went down on Monday. And we had Shane Martin Band play Friday night. He started at 9 p.m. and he played till midnight. We hired the police department to come, and so they along with many other organizations in the community, volunteered their time for safety and security, but it was ultimately up to the police department. And we had no charges, we had no issues. It was pretty smooth. I think that we had a great turnout for it being the very first time that we've ever had it. So with that being said, Saturday night, we decided that we were just gonna do a DJ. And that worked out well, and it was successful, okay? So this year, the reason why I'm asking to go from 9:30 to 12:30 is because bands play for 3 hours, and the rodeo doesn't get out until 10 p.m. And being with so many industrial businesses, I have spoken with the people that are homeowners, and I have gotten their permission that we can play till 12:30. I have spoken with St. Thomas, and they're okay with me doing the parking and working with them to make that go smoothly. But I'm also asking to have it extended where I could have a band for both Friday and Saturday night. So, Matt, is there anything that you have for me, or?
No, I think the feedback that I got from the officers that were there was, as Christy said, there was I think there was a minor assault, and I think we had one DWI that was later, but I'm considering the volume of people that was there was nothing out of ordinary. The bar did have appropriate staff, which is one of the big concerns always when places hold events. Oftentimes they'll understaff it, which will lead to, taxing the other public safety services, and that wasn't an issue this past year. So we didn't get any calls related to noise complaints last year during the event. I know we've talked about in the past that the city standard has really been midnight, and that's when the amplified music stopped for the extensions. I think the 12:30 is, you know, would be a reasonable compromise. I would probably push back on a 1 o'clock or later, just because of how things tend to escalate, you know, exponentially as things get later. But I think if the council were to consider deviating from 12 o'clock, 12:30 would be a reasonable consideration. I could also support a 12 o'clock end as well, but I think your reasoning makes sense too, as how you're trying to phase things, so.
Yeah.
it would be-
And I want to tell you that last year, what happened was, so the music, Shane Martin stopped at midnight, and then I had my DJ then go inside the bar, and he played from 12 to 1, and I'll never do that again. Because you have all these people now that all want to come into this small
sure.
space. And so even talking to Pete, he said, you know, Christie, it would make more sense to, you know,
Leave it
have
outside.
people outside.
Yeah.
And then when the event is over, then they leave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, so I'm open for any questions or issues or concerns you have.
Dean?
My only question or concern is the neighbors' Rush Creek development and stuff. There's more people there this year.
Okay?
Nobody complained from there
We did not,
last year.
I don't know if anyone
we
was.
did not have any
Noise.
logged calls for service from there last year, no. Not
None.
noise complaints on the rodeo weekend.
Okay, but I just want to be
Perfect.
clear,
I love
when
it.
I say neighbors, I'm not talking any of them.
Yep,
Okay.
and that's what I figured.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
talking,
I'm talking Scotty Tripp.
yeah, I know who you're talking about,
Okay.
and they're there to support you. And,
Yeah.
you get a good bunch of neighbors and stuff, and you're commercial next to industrial, but
Yeah.
the folks to the north, I'd supply them with coupons and stuff and invite them to the party.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I have a 2 o'clock license.
Yep.
I would not be using that for that weekend. I mean, I would expect, you know, that if it's cleared through you that they would play till 12:30, and that's when we would do last call. So, we wouldn't be using our 2 o'clock license that weekend.
Just generally speaking, if
Yeah.
I may. I like how you commit to crowd control and the half an hour is half an hour could be a lot or it could be a little, you know, based on, how I think it's easy to give a half an hour and it seems like a little because you do a lot in controlling the behavior at your place. So I don't really have a qualm with it. Just keep doing it that way so we don't have to have a conversation about if things get out of hand or something.
I understand.
I like going to your place, so.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And, you know, I mean, I can only control so much.
Oh, yeah.
I
But the
mean-
staffing and working with our police department, like
Yes.
that stuff is good.
Okay.
It always helps your cause when you have that kind of relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I said, I have the Lions, I have the Corcoran, or the Northwest Area JCs, I have some of the Country Days people. I mean, I have really great people and staff that are willing to spend their time and, you know, help out with the manpower.
Sounds good.
Makes
Do you need a
sense, I
motion?
think. Do we need a motion?
If we could, just to formalize it from they are in the midst of putting together the special event permit with the PD, but this just formalizes that process.
I'll make a
We can bring
motion.
that.
I'll make a motion to approve or to direct staff to draft that with approving.
Authorize that.
Yes, authorized to 12:30 on the 2 nights requested as requested by
Music.
the applicant.
I'll second.
Music till 12:30,
Yes,
last
as
call at
outlined in the
12:20, done at 1 o'clock.
And that's
Love it.
typically,
You'll be home by 12:45.
typically we've asked for what the.
I can walk home and I'd be home by
Noise ordinance is.
1:15.
So amplified music till 12:30 and person or crowd-related noise till 1 o'clock is, I think, how we approved it in the past.
Yeah.
So that we're clear on if we're questioned as to why can they violate the ordinance. So that would be the specific direction we'd look for, what noises at which times.
And that's my motion.
That's my second.
Okay, perfect. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got someone exciting coming this year? Van?
So does anybody know the Devin Worley band?
Yeah,
So Devin has committed.
What?
that's one.
Saturday,
Cool.
And then Tim,
also got Hitchville that was waiting on.
I'd heard Garth Brooks at one point,
Fantastic.
some of those guys too, but just couldn't land them this year.
Have to try.
All right.
Yeah, so council members, I just want it to be very clear that there will be other activities going on
love
during
it.
the day, but that's okay,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
I just
so,
need
yeah.
permission for the music at 12:30, right?
I believe so.
That's
Yes.
the ordinance. The expanding the license premise is would be a liquor license thing, but yeah, for the council, the ordinance exception, it was the council authorization. And then the,
Thank you.
Okay, sounds
Perfect.
good, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good one.
thanks, Christie.
Thanks,
Thank
Kristen.
you.
Okay, now back to, let's see here, we don't have any planning business. 9A, thank you. Unfinished business, we'll do a public comment opportunity for 9A and B, and then go into 9A.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Anyone joining us in the audience who'd like to move forward and speak on state your name and address at the podium? Otherwise, anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand if you're joining us on a smart device. Mayor and Council, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Perfect, we'll go into 9A.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. In front of you is a staff report related to RFPs and looking at what we've done in the past. One of the discussions that we've had at a council level is whether or not we wanted to move forward with reviewing RFPs. I did look back through all of the staff files and was able to find that the last time we did a full RFP process across the city was 2009. And so really today, it's a discussion of, do we want to look at doing an RFP for this year? Who would we want to do? Do we want to create a schedule? I did reach out to 3 of our surrounding communities, Hanover, Medina, and Independence. And the 3 of them don't have a schedule currently for RFPs. They go out on kind of an ad hoc basis if there's something, if they're having some issues with that. I have heard of other communities having a schedule, but I wasn't able to verify today with anyone that there is a surrounding community that does have a schedule similar to what we could propose.
Gotcha. Thank you. Well, I think the first thing maybe we should try to get a list of that has all the services that we use consultants for that could theoretically be part of a RFP rotation
I
policy.
can look at getting that, so.
Planning,
initially-
engineering, legal, IT. kind
Planning,
of.
engineering, legal, auditing services is one of the things
Okay.
I was thinking of, but we certainly could look at IT, we could look at building official,
Didn't we just do an RFP for IT like 2 years ago?
RFP for IT, that would.
Oh, we
be
still would
one
need
of
the
most
list anyways,
recent.
yeah.
Yeah, would be the most recent, but we certainly could look at a list for what type of services. Generally, it sort of depends if we're looking at consultants or if we're looking at services in general. So are we looking at the groups that provide some of the services to us, or are we looking at our contracted folks who kind of work with us?
Like the pass-through versus,
Yeah.
like garbage collection,
Oh,
for
right.
example.
I see what
Or
you're saying.
engineering service that the builders end up paying for by themselves. And can we get them on, like, how much they cost? Even if it's a pay-through entity?
What do you mean, can we get them?
Like how much?
If we're gonna get a list of,
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
how much,
Providers.
how much?
How much it-
The volume of work.
yeah, dollar amount paid per year, whether it be taxpayers or,
Yeah, be good.
I guess, it wasn't my idea, but if, like, we don't have to let's pretend it costs $90 a year to do recycling for the city of Corcoran facility. We don't need to necessarily RFP that every 2 years because it's not that big of a spend.
Right.
So like if
And
we
like
had-
last time there was barely anyone that, did we only have the one?
For we only do one recycle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying, as an example, we're
Yeah.
a
Right.
pencil supplier,
That's a big line.
$10
item
a
in the
year, you know, we don't have to, I'd like them in some order that we can see how important of a
Yeah.
spend it is.
Makes sense.
I think we can likely predict the top two. But yeah, I think longer term, you'd want a Pareto to guide which ones you do at what interval. Maybe some you don't do at all.
To your point, what's pass-through cost versus what's, you know, what's coming right out of the city budget? Right, so if we spend X amount on engineering, but most of those costs are picked up by developers, and we're happy with the engineering service, I mean, that's, I'm just saying engineering in general, but
Yeah.
there isn't that much impact to go out with an RF, to even have an RFP on something like that, if the minimal impact is low, and they're meeting quality standards.
Yeah. I think there's still maybe some value to what, you know, whatever the timeline is and the rotation is, having a date where we make sure that we're just doing due diligence and that we're getting, you know, even if it's a lot of pass-through cost, that getting the best price and the best service we can. And a lot of times it might be we go through the process and we end up picking the, you know, people we're currently with.
Yeah, but the process can be long and
Yeah,
arduous,
that's
right?
true.
The process alone costs a lot, and if we're doing a revolving door of RFPs, let's say you go on every, I mean, I counted just right there, 6 services we go through planning, through financial planning, engineering, IT, legal. If you did that every 6 years, you'd be going through an RFP one a year, and how much time and effort is that on staff?
It's a pain to do government RFPs too, because you gotta go through the system. It's not like me calling Ace and then calling some other garbage company and then calling someone else. Like,
Right.
there's
There's
a
more to
whole
it,
bunch
the
of
process.
stuff and complication.
And
Ballpark, what are we going to end up paying to Stantec as part of the water system construction? What's their fee for what they're doing for us?
Well, if you kind of, when we started the whole water project, it was probably over the last 3 years, 2-3 years, and we're probably, I might get this wrong, but we're in the ballpark of maybe $1 million.
Just in the planning to this point?
Yeah, plant, when we designed the tower, treatment plant, 2 wells, a temporary well. So, I mean, plus or minus a couple $100,000, but it's, you know, it's significant expenses.
And if you
I could
spend-
follow up with exact numbers, but it's significant.
And then 20 million on a plant, 4 million on a water tower. My understanding is that typical fees are, what, like 10-15% of project cost?
They vary, you know, on a larger project, there'll be a lower percentage. You know, rule of thumb is 15 to 20% on a project, but it, you know, it can vary. $100,000 projects, it could creep up to 50, 60. $10 million projects, it should draw down to 5, 6, 7%, just due to
Scale?
Scale, yeah. But, I mean, you're talking, I mean, again, don't quote me, but engineering invoices to the city for 2022 were probably almost $2 million. Now, maybe 65, 70% of that was pass-through. Again, these are just anecdotal, so, but I think it's pretty close in those percentages. I'm within 5-10%, so just some context.
Appreciate it. And I would think even if we did something like, you know, it's one service every 2 or 3 years, that way it'd still have a process that we're going through, as opposed to just not, we haven't done one since 2009, other than either when a contract's up or a new service.
And there's a cost containment element too. If you get to the point where you've got 2 vendors that you use, just like we do when we bid construction projects, we get, you know, 6 or 7 bids. There's usually a pretty significant difference between the high and the low bid. We take advantage of that to the benefit of the residents of the city. Ideally, if you had a couple different vendors that you can use for projects, maybe one of them has a specialty person who can do something more efficiently, and they can handle your program for considerably less cost. You can take advantage of that kind of a variance when you have a couple people that you've brought into your system through the RFP.
You know, I could see some of that on maybe one-off projects, but on overall planning or overall engineering or even overall legal, right? Part of what you're paying for too is the history they have and the knowledge of what's going on in the city and what happened in the past. So if you took on a new planner, for example, we're basically paying them to get an understanding of our codes and ordinances and whatnot. And we're gonna have to pay for their time that we have to actually teach them some of the nuance and history of what went on in the city that we're already paid somebody in that position to do. And same with engineering, right? Our engineers know what's going on with water hydrology all around the city. They know what's going on with those things, so it's not gonna be a pure dollar for dollar cost, because there's empirical costs that we're gonna give up, we're gonna be paying for that it's hard to judge.
I think there's also maybe something to be said of when we're getting pricing, you know, maybe isn't a intentional, we're gonna get a discount because we're more competitively bidding it, but I think it sticks in people's minds when we're getting pricing over the long term on something. You know, if we have another option, they gotta make sure that they're being competitive. I think there's some value added to that. I get that, what you're saying, I think it's a good point, that it's a big process. And doing something on an annual basis or even closer, that's probably not feasible or worth it for how much staff time we put into it and council time we put into it. So yeah, I think there's some value in having some sort of policy on it, but I guess I don't know what the right number would be.
Currently, do all our outside consultants, do we have contracts with them? Are they just annual?
So at this point, once we've done the RFP, we do a letter of engagement for the next year. So we do that with the annual appointments.
Annual appointments every January, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
So in theory, I mean, if we did an RFP, what would we be looking at? Would we be looking at like a 3-year contract or however long for the RFP, or?
I think it could be however you set it up.
Yeah, I
but-
think we have a lot of flexibility in how we might set that up. You might see with some of the unknowns with, you know, staffing costs and things like that, you might see some, like, change over rate over year, like we would see with other things, but, you know, I think that there are probably ways to set it up. I don't know that we've explored that type of RFP recently, but we certainly could look into what kind of options there are.
Yeah. Well, maybe regardless, the first step is getting that list together with some of that cost info and everything, and then we can have the conversation on whether or not we want to set some sort of, not yearly policy, but policy X number of years for those services going off our RFP, or if it's something we just want to keep in mind for when we're making those annual appointments, and if we want to do it next year at that point.
Yeah, I mean, getting the information to understand what it is and what the true costs to the city are for each service versus what's passed through
Mhm.
would be beneficial to have, and then we can make a decision if we want to look at putting some type of RFP process in place, because, I mean, right now, we really have just annual appointments. We could go walk away from any vendor at any time if we wanted to.
Right. Yeah, that works for me.
The appointments aren't exclusive, right? I mean, if we determined halfway through a year that we wanted to switch, nothing prevents us from doing that.
Not that I'm
I
aware
don't
of.
believe so.
Not that I'm aware of.
You really just set the terms for that year.
Yeah.
For the amount you're using them, yeah.
And one of the questions in the meantime, while I'm looking at this, is just, is it possible in an RFP to set a timetable?
Yeah.
I think that was a question I heard, so that might be something I
great.
could get an answer to at least as we're exploring this just a bit
Mhm.
with putting together that list. So we
That'd be
can-
great.
We can do that. We'll looking at the February 23rd meeting, it's probably
Yeah,
not
there's
gonna be
not
the
a huge rush.
23rd, but it'll be sometime in March.
There's not a
So
huge
we'll get
rush on
back
that.
to you.
Perfect.
Where I'm thinking at this point, I anticipate our spend on engineering to go up a lot. Not just with the water system, but as we're starting to work on parks and park design, I know we've been working with Stantec to help with some of that stuff. That'll all be city-borne cost. Road projects will be coming through with Hackamore, maybe some others as well. Seems like the biggest opportunity for savings is probably in engineering, potentially. Do we have a good sense for what other options might be out there and how competitive Stantec has been for us?
Well, the data we could look back on, so we're currently partnering with Medina on some of that design for Hackamore, and we're using WSB in that role. So we could pull some of the costs for Stantec's engineers' hourly rates versus WSB's, and I would think our current rates with our vendor are quite a bit lower than what WSB charges now. I hear you on the volume that engineering has. I think the advantage of an RFP for engineering is that when you start pushing, we haven't been 2 million every year for engineering, so for the folks that are listening, holy cow, that's a heck of a lot of money, and it is. We've been ramping up to that, and we'll probably have another year of that, and then who knows beyond that. I think the advantage of an RFP for engineering is to specialize, and Councilmember Nichols has talked about this before, is just to get somebody else, so if somebody ends up leaving job or moving away, we don't get stuck with all the volume of work we have. So it would be more of a strategic RFP. It would be when you start talking larger cities, they have a pool, they're like qualified folks where you can onboard them over time, develop relationships, good good learning up to everyone's with different folks, and then assign the jobs by specialty, right? If one consultant performs better as better specialist in this role, you would have some flexibility to assign that project to them at that agreed to rate. So it's a whole blow up of our current system. Probably something that whether it's this year or next year, it's probably something we should consider. It would be a huge undertaking because of the complexities and how do we unweave the feels like hundreds of escrow accounts we have, but we have to start somewhere if we continue to be at this pace. So I think it's a strategic RFP when you talk to specifically to engineering, which is kind of under my realm. I think our rates are good. I think we go out. I don't think you're going to, on a straight hourly basis, I think we get good value. We start pushing 2 million of work. I don't like going into C team or D team's bench. So I do think if we maintain that level, it is smart and wise to develop backup plans. So I think, again, strategic RFP makes sense as it relates to engineering, and over time, probably other departments too. I'm speaking to that from my perspective.
Thank you, Kevin.
And I would caution you when looking at straight rates, I know when, in the past, when they've come in with stuff, they've told us where they haven't charged us for certain things. So there's a lot of things probably under contract where, because of our relationship has been so long-term, they've let things slide, give us the benefit. Which, if you're looking at straight rates, you're probably not gonna see that. You probably have to do a little deeper dive in some of those things where we save money because of a long-term relationship. And you're not gonna get out of somebody that you just sign on for an RFP.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I would certainly say it should be strategic for us in what we're developing as a system or a structure. That I would support something sooner than later in that terms. At least specific to engineering, that's how I would advocate it. So it's more of we're growing so large, are we appropriate? It's not a dissatisfaction of current staff from my perspective, at least specific to engineering.
Makes sense. Okay, so I think we all good with starting at getting that information together and bring it back at some point? Like I said,
I would think
no strict timeline on it. Perfect. Okay. 9B, 2023 core strategies and short-term goals.
Yes, thanks, Mayor and Council. We did have our work session to outline our goals for 2023. We hosted that on January 23rd. Through that process, we ended up having 9 high-priority goals that were identified. Staff wanted to bring forward the final report as we got it here, and then we will be putting together some action steps and measurables upcoming, likely at the February 23rd meeting, just to outline how do we get to some of the things we're doing. We are working on some of our goals, those high priority goals we had identified already. We've been working on the PUD project. That was one of the 9 identified items. We are working on scheduling either work session or time at the council meeting on the 9th to move forward some discussion on pedestrian crossings and how do we ensure them being safe. So we'll bring together a formal work plan to council, but just as we got this, the short-term goals in hand, I thought it'd be appropriate to bring to council.
Sounds good. Any questions or comments on that? If not, I will make a motion to adopt the core strategies and short-term goals for 2023. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
On to 10. We have a public comment opportunity for the street lighting policy specific to Hackamore, or a broader conversation as well.
Yes. Anyone joining us virtually can press star 9 or click raise your reactions and raise your hand. We don't currently have anyone in the audience here. Mayor and Council, it doesn't look like anyone's joining us
Okay,
virtually.
let's go into 10A.
Wanting to raise their hand. This one, I can breeze through it a little bit, and Kevin might be able to talk to a bit more of the specifics, but we've been working on the Hackamore Road project, and we wanted to bring forward a street lighting plan, as we do have a bituminous trail on that north side. And as proposed today is what we have in front of you is what is the city's current practice of what we've been doing on other collector roads. But Kevin and Matt can talk a bit more about safety and how we came up with the policy maybe.
Yeah, I think it's just a check-in on the vision, because most of our lights that we're adding are in new developed areas, and this is sort of near and adjacent developed areas, but through some existing, at least this one stretch of existing houses in Corcoran. So I think it was just to check in and make sure council's vision supported our practice. In terms of spacing, I'll just run through quick. The new red dots, there should be something in there if you want to pull it up for folks, but the new red dots would be the pedestrian lights, the shorter pedestrian lights. Those are typically on 300-foot minimum spacing, which is about the length of a football field, to give you some context. The blue dots on this map are overhead, the taller overhead lights, and those are at intersections. They're blue because they will be installed with the development, so not part of this project, but there's a placeholder for a future one. They're at Tavera, future development on the northeast corner, likely at some point, and then Wolcott Glen will be required to add one at their street connection when that builds out. The green are new potential overhead lights. For example, 116 would have one. We show one at Hackamore Circle. That might be one to talk about. Would we need one that large there with just 4 homes? Is the threshold of traffic to pedestrian safety, does that matter? Hackamore, and then there's one that proposed at Hunter, that's kind of at the top of a hill and kind of an awkward intersection there with all the intersections. So, from a public safety standpoint, we certainly would want that more lit whatever the grammatical term is. I didn't do good in school.
English was not his long suit.
Wisconsin.
Hunter's not really at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
It's towards the top of the hill.
No, the hill is more closer to Ravinia, where the red light is.
Isn't that getting flattened a little bit too?
The hill that gets flattened is down by Walcott Lane.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, generally towards the top of the hill. So that's for, just kind of highlighting. And it's also because it's kind of that new intersection that Medina built. It's just kind of an awkward piece. So again, it's a balance of pedestrian safety with light pollution, frankly, is really the conversation. So, and then the yellow dots are existing lights that exist today. So, and they're really smattered all over with no plan, I would say, but they're built up over the years, and mostly just at new road crossings. And again, with this project, Medina's not building a trail on the south side. We are building a trail on the north side. We haven't finalized a JPA. It's trending towards it being a Corcoran-only trail. It's in our comp plan that we have a trail. It's maybe easier to manage from a maintenance standpoint, not having Medina having input on trail maintenance for a small marginal fee. So it's trending to be a Corcoran trail, so it's really to your discretion on the streetlights. So cost of streetlights are probably worst case scenario would be $50,000, probably under any scenario $45,000. And that's because the charge from these are right-handed pin lights that capital outlay charge is really most expensive for the wiring. They charge basically nothing for the streetlights. So even if we shrunk the lights in half, we wouldn't have a huge savings. Now we might have a long-term savings at $25, $30 a light as you forecast out. But outlay, if you have lights planned for 40 to 50,000, and that's not going to change. And that could be a project cost. Our staff's position is that's a project cost. We would pay the maintenance electric bill, but the outlay would be part of the project cost. So something to think about. I don't really have much else other than for us to answer questions, or if Matt wants to elaborate.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the logic. Obviously, for any of our developments, we're trying to eliminate as much light pollution as possible, so we stick with the smaller pedestal lights along areas. We've looked at what we've done in the past is doing the overhead lights at intersections where there's crossings so that it better illuminates both pedestrian ramps so that cars can see as they're going if there's pedestrians using that trail crossing. And so this more, I guess I would call it heavily lit standard is when you have we're talking collector roads and trails where you have that larger number of people and traffic as we look to the future of Ravinia finishing, Tavera, and potentially the Gagne piece that, there will be a fair amount of trail use. So what we've done is tried to space everything, on that, looked at about that 300 foot and figure that a football field length between lights seems like a reasonable amount for being able to see your pedestrians and have appropriate safety lighting. So that's kind of why we've gone with the pedestal lights where it makes sense, but I think the thought is if we have the overhead lights at intersections, it avoids the thought of having one on either side. In other times where we've had trails on both sides, we have staggered them on either sides of the road. In this case, we don't, Medina's on the other side. It's not really an option for us. So we do try and stagger them as much as possible, but like I said, look at that kind of 300 feet range is usually what we try and target.
There are some existing lights, though, on the Medina side, aren't there?
Those are all the yellow dots.
Wherever the
Yeah.
yellow dots are, those are existing lights.
So you can see how it's kind of offset. We didn't look at adding any, we've used those to try and offset any additions to this one where it seemed appropriate, for instance, at Steeplechase. And then a little bit on, other county road crossings, we've had two overheads where we've had the intersection of two collector roads or county roads. That's probably not necessary with the two lights on the corner of 116 and Hackamore, which is why we just showed the one overhead
Okay.
instead of doing trying to get two overheads.
It seems like a lot of lights.
It does.
And, especially when you're talking in an area that was, I can see it more when you're talking about from Ravinia out to 101, or even when Gagne develops over the section in the middle where there's homes right along the road, it's a lot of lights coming onto them right away.
I agree.
And then the new street in Medina that goes down into the development, was not far off Hunter Road. I mean, can we just use their light? Isn't that close enough?
Where are you talking about?
So here they have they have a new street
That
here.
yellow light
Oh,
on the
okay,
left on
yep.
the screen there, between the red and the green,
Gotcha.
right,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
It's at least-
Yeah, I think that was because of the pedestrian crossing at Hunter Road is why we had the a light closer to the intersection. So that one, again, that's why that one shows I think that one is actually an overhead because of the two pedestrian ramps of the trail crossing. So, yeah, there would be light from the one obviously on Zinnia Drive. And I think that was just looking at the pedestrian crossing is why there's the standard that we've used in the past had the lighting there. So, if there's a desire to do something different, more than a football field, you do 450 feet, or is there a better option? I think in the past, we've said that 300 feet was what our goal was. We can, certainly do whatever the council's direction is. We want to make sure that it's, lit to a safe level, but also not overly polluting, which is, type of light matters as well. I mean, we're aware that the overheads cast a lot more light. It's downward directed more than the pedestal lights. The pedestal brings it down more to pedestrian level. So,
Yeah, some of these people are gonna see two streetlights when they look out their windows, right? They're gonna get hit from both directions. If you look at Hackamore Circle, each of the homes on there they've got a light on each corner of their property, plus a light at the street.
That's a lot.
You know, the house on Hunter and the corner down there, they have a light at the back of their property and a light on the street. The house directly across has a light on the street, a light across the street, potentially a light they could even see from right on top of the hill. I mean, I guess I would prefer to see less lights.
Yeah. Do we, Jesse, I know you and I talked briefly about trying to see if we could find any info on what other cities
Yeah.
have.
We didn't, I talked to, kind of, how we got to our philosophy with, the team, and I don't know that we necessarily based it off of any other particular city. But that's certainly something, if you want us to explore some other options, we could certainly try to.
I'm not aware of that in like any standard detail plates I've ever come across in my career on streetlight spacing.
Okay.
I'll call it research, quote unquote, which is really Matt and I drove around trying to look, 3, 4, 5 years ago, what other areas did. And this is more in line with other areas. Now, the problem here is these are in first and then everyone else comes in. This outlay would not probably even trigger a conversation in a denser community or a more developed community, but it does because of our existing situation. So it's that vision component. So we don't think it's excessive if you actually looked at around, but we understand that it's new, and the light pollution conversation is part of the context. So some other just items that may be possibility for you guys to think about is if it's a concern in one specific spot, we could stub out, we could work with Right Hennepin to stub out systems where we could add it later if there was a safety issue, right?
Okay.
We wouldn't be capitalizing that through the project, so to speak, but again, the lights, at least under current pricing, are minimal through Right Hennepin, right? If they maintain that philosophy, it's like really minimal, like $100, $150. So that is an option to have us plan for this, and if we get safety concerns or near misses or worst case scenario in an accident, we could then react and add it. So that's another direction option that we could consider. Because the biggest expense is outlaying the wiring, basically, in the conduit.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if you go down Lawndale, north of 10, the only lights that are along, and that has bituminous trail on one side, concrete on the other. The only lights that are down that road all the way up to Weaver Lake Park and County Road 30, or excuse me, Weaver Lake Road, the only lights that are there are at the intersections of properties. They're at the intersections of the roads. There's none following, there's no pedestal lights following the trail and stuff. I
Gotcha.
drove that the other night, just looking at, and why do we need to light that much of a trail? Now, I like your idea of pulling the wire and being ready for something, but all those pedestal lights for the trail, maybe something nice in the future, but at least light the intersections, and I'd really like to revisit that, or I'd really like to tell Right Hennep, and it'd be nice if they were less obtrusive than, like I've said before, the ones on Gleason and 116, there's
Yeah,
four
those
there.
are bad.
And the sun rises, it's just way too much. And the ruralness of Hackamore, once you get beyond Ravinia and then east of Trevera. So I'd kind of like to keep that rural as long as possible. And then my other question was, I'm trying to remember, wasn't there going to be a bike lane on the Medina side of Hackamore? Or is this the only,
There's the shoulder.
the shoulder was gonna be a bike lane?
shoulder for each way is a planned bike lane.
Okay,
So, yeah, the intent would be to, whether they follow that or not, but
Yeah.
if there's a broader shoulder for bikes to do, that's another element to this, but, yes, I mean, we're not planning to mark it, but there is a 6-foot shoulder that's kind
Okay.
of our bike lane, if we wanted to add one later.
we don't have anybody from the neighborhood other than folks on council
So
commenting from this?
Yep, so this is a fairly new, plan.
Addition to it?
Addition to it. So I think we've always planned that there would be some sort of lighting, but nothing's been formalized with the plan
Okay.
Yeah.
process.
Nothing's,
So, to your point, and we haven't had public engagement on this particular topic, but that's something we could look at. If nothing else, maybe in letting folks along the corridor know, because we are gonna be doing some open houses here. We could let the folks along the corridor know that there will be some lighting changes coming with it as well.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I was gonna say, for what the experience would be like if for instance, driving from, I think the Gleason 116 intersection, I think there's things that we can learn from there, but as far as the frequency of the lighting, if you drive Gleason Parkway
Yeah.
between 116 and 101, that's a similar frequency. I think those are staggered.
Those are about
Those are-
300 feet?
Those are staggered, but your experience of frequency would be similar to what you would experience there is what this would end up being. I think
but we've been trying to follow the 300-foot gap between lights, so by staggering them, we could get 600 feet.
Once you get into Ravinia and you get into the houses and stuff, is there still
still about the same standard.
that staggered light along the walking paths?
Well,
along
they're
the
more at like intersections of trails and sidewalks and at specific crossings. Once you start populating that, it kind of achieves the same standard, so.
It's close,
It's just because this is a linear trail, it's more on the spacing.
yeah.
With all the cul-de-sacs and trails and roads in the developments, it's more of where you have intersections of trails, is kind of covers it.
There's a lot of crossings in that stretch just because of the roads.
I would agree that Hackamore Circle, because of it being such a small cul-de-sac, you could probably just do a pedestal light there instead of an overhead light and be adequate. And that would eliminate one of the big bright spots.
Where's that one?
It's this one here. It's where it turns off just into a cul-de-sac.
Oh, the green one here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The green one to the left.
Or do you try to do one overhead in between where the two overheads are at Hunter and, my eyes are not good enough, Hackmore Circle? You get one overhead to try to split that, as opposed to have two overheads and a pedestal in between.
I think if you just do lighting on the intersections where the intersections go across, a street for pedestrian safety.
So you're talking about just the pedestal?
No, the overhead.
Okay.
Well, I
At the
guess I'd
inter-
have
or
to see
would it be better just doing a pedestal at those? Then it wouldn't be those bright things that,
Yeah, I mean, a pedestal light still throws a lot of light, because you got the open, so guess I'd have to see, and how does our pedestal, is our pedestals the same as the pedestals in our Medina? Or our overheads, I mean, I'm sorry.
Our overheads would be the ones that the overheads that you'd see are the ones that you see at 116, because remember,
It's the
Red
only
Hampton
one.
only has one of
Yeah.
each. So the overheads that you see at 116 is Gleason, that's what that would look like. And then the pedestal ones that you see coming down 66, those black carriage ones,
Yeah.
those are the only two options we have. Because this is we're in a right-handed coverage area here. Medina is actually XL, ironically, across the street.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I drove past the one on the south side, and it didn't look as obtrusive.
It could have been older, but yeah, XL is on the south side of Hackmore, Medina, so they would have their model.
Well, it's the new street that comes up through that development.
Oh, that was, be a new XL option then, yep.
Yeah.
I think Wright Hennepin used to have two options, didn't they?
They did when the first edition of Ravinia, so when you come in off of, when you come in off of 101 in the island, there's that kind of glass one. That was a second option, a little bit more ornamental. That was one of their options, and they eliminated that after the first edition. So there's one or two random ornamental ones.
One thing I wanted to bring up with the monthly cost, for 17 lights, it's about $5,000 a year, it appears. Is it an option to go to some kind of a solar so that we wouldn't incur that long-term cost? Could that be advantageous over the long term?
And, yeah, it's a good question. We'd have to actually reach out with Wright Hennepin and see what they do. Again, they're the way we operate, they're the provider and the maintainer. So they'd almost have to switch to that program would be my suspicion, but I can contact them and see if they have entertained that or if people have been requesting that.
I'm guessing they don't, because it would run counter to their incentive.
they don't.
But yeah, I mean, that would be a longer conversation, but I mean, I think it'd be tough maybe to get that in the timelines we're looking at here, but we can certainly, if that's a request.
They'd probably still end up wiring it because cloudy weeks and stuff, you wouldn't have
I mean,
streetlights if there was no solar. It's a good idea. Those are not as bright.
I do in general like the idea of maybe finding some that we still wire, but hold off on actually putting the light in until or unless there's an issue.
Safety concerns
Right.
from,
Well, we could in theory do that with all the pedestal lights, right? Because any future development would have those pedestal lights.
yeah, I mean, in theory, we could do a lot, I mean, we could install them and just not put a bulb in them either. I don't know if that's better or worse, but.
then you're gonna get calls on streetlights out.
Well, you're gonna get calls either way,
Yeah.
and I'd imagine if you hold an open house and share this plan
The
with
room will be
people,
full.
you're gonna get a lot of pushback on both sides of the border.
Mm-hmm.
Can the lights be motion sensing, so they only go off when there's a pedestrian?
I think the answer is the same as.
Clap on, clap off.
What if we went to Public Works lighting oil lamps each night?
Yeah.
Job security, right? I wouldn't vote for it.
Well, what's kind of the timing in terms of when we need to decision on this?
I mean, we could, well, it's actually, it's more for notifying folks, so, I mean, ideally in the next month.
Okay.
But it's not bid out because Right-Handed Pin installs it, so,
Yeah.
I mean, we have some time.
To your point, if
But
the bid, it
we'd
would,
probably wanna know one before we finalize the JPA with Maple Grove, or excuse me, Medina.
right,
It's probably 30 to 60 days away,
okay.
maybe less.
Yeah, and I would just, as you're giving it thought, obviously I would advocate for sure at the pedestrian crossings, making sure that those are well-lit intersections. Think of the kids at night out, whatever, and you can imagine all the scenarios, but start considering if this isn't the right spacing, what is the right distance as we look at, for the future. And it's easy to look at and compare how it is now, and that corridor is gonna look vastly different once you have the Gagne piece done and
Yeah.
Tavera done. And is that the right fit at that time as well? And I'm not saying it needs to be fit both places. We can phase it as we talked about, but any guidance that you guys have on what your expectations or feel should be for that would be helpful, and as we're looking at future ones to know what that target range should be.
We're not gonna have any lighting issues with Hunter's Ridge when Bellwether connects, are we? Up there, that isn't proposed to be lit.
You mean Hunter's Ridge at 116 or Hunter's
Yeah,
Ridge at the connection?
well, as it connects in. We're not doing anything with that road to improve it other than overlaying more asphalt on it, right?
So within Bellwether itself would have streetlights, so.
Right.
Within the development itself, so Bellwether 8th connects to the east side of Hunter's Ridge. Within the new roads, we would have the crossings following our policy.
Yeah.
We're not, and then we have us also committed with the project turn lane improvements at 116 in Hunter's Ridge. That'll be constructed this year, but we don't have an improvement between the two
Okay.
unless the developer uses that as an access. Then that would trigger the overlay. But even just triggering an overlay wouldn't trigger street lighting.
Right, so I guess what I'm wondering is how many other, we don't really have any other developments like this right now where we would,
Well,
We don't, but I mean, what's coming, so a future conversation in a couple, 2 months or less would be, what do we do for City Center Drive? So we're developing as a staff some ideas or options for landscape, the vision for City Center Drive, the reps, what that lighting looks like, and it gets more complicated because that's our downtown. Do we do,
That would be more lit,
Banners,
there's gonna
it's
be more
probably more-
population,
yeah,
there's gonna
more
be a lot more
dense.
there, that would make sense out here,
Yeah.
so
But
there's
that's new
future
development.
conversations everywhere, and that's why there's not really a standard, because I think it's the vision of each corridor, and there's a little bit of,
I'd say the other one
everything's
is,
different, so it's hard to apply an equivalent standard. We do our best to cover stuff, but that, I mean, that's really why we brought it back to you. We recognize
Yeah.
it's not an easy choice, and
yeah.
it was appropriate to weigh in with you guys, and, and it will move. Early on, it will be light pollution is a problem. In 5 years, the neighborhood vibe will probably more likely be safety with all the little kids that live there, so, maybe a blended approach is appropriate.
Yeah, we'll have the complaint of cars are even traveling faster on it now that it's a nice smooth road, so. Keep the kids away from it.
Yeah, this is a tough one because when we go, if you recall, we kind of got a vision for try to make this corridor as rural as possible, right? So we maintained ditch sections where we could. We minimized the impacts to trees. But then there was also concerns about safety and where would the bikers be? And that's what, one of our goals is pedestrian safety and creating a trail. So this is the microcosm of competing interests.
We're drawing people to the area, but want to also keep the current feel, which doesn't really cater to people.
Yeah, I guess I would be inclined to push for just having it pedestrian crossings with the
Yeah.
future potential for enhancement if needed.
so like wiring it in, but then
So
it's not.
plan-
Well, they're gonna
for
run
it.
the wire, right, so it's
Yeah.
just a matter of.
Wire it, just don't put up the pedestal.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
And then at the crossings, is there direction on overhead versus pedestal?
I think pedestrian.
I'd rather see
You
pedestal
swap
than
it over
overhead.
either.
I think at the county 116, I would prefer an
Yeah,
overhead.
not at the,
I think at the county roads overhead
At
makes
the-
sense,
the
yeah.
Neighborhood roads, the pedestals can
yeah.
Yeah,
try that.
That would make sense.
I think we're all on the
Are
same
they
page.
pedestals within Ravinia at where the streets connect?
I
Yeah.
believe they're overhead.
Inside the neighborhood. I don't
Inside the
think.
neighborhood, they're pedestal, but
Yeah.
I think at Hackamore, that's an overhead, from memory. And
Yes, it
we-
is.
We have given Tver Third an overhead at their intersection. We can change it. And then we're planning to give Wolcott Glen an overhead at that entrance. But those are a lot of houses accessing that road, so when you compare Steeplechase to Hackamore Circle, the amount of crossings is significantly different.
Yep.
right?
I
You
think
have
you
four
could prob-
houses, and it's not gonna extend in the future in Hackamore Circle where you just
Right.
get more volume going through those, and so that's kind of.
So it might make sense for Hackamore Road and Hunter Road to be pedestals because they're not a lot of volume going through, but if you're talking about neighborhood entry, neighborhood corridors, that those might make sense for.
Yeah.
But if through traffic or something, you know, because Hunter and Hackamore are technically one cul-de-sac versus the other neighborhoods have through connections.
I think for the goldenrod one, you wouldn't need an overhead. And in the plan, it's actually shown as blue.
Which one?
Goldenrod, the Walcott one,
Yep,
I thought you just said that one was gonna be an overhead.
that's what I think the blue means, future overhead,
Oh, does it?
you know. But that's, I mean, we'd have time to change that, but that's what following our practice.
Well, it's probably only a difference of putting in the anchoring bolts too.
It's,
The pattern.
like I said, I think we could work with Right Hennepin to swap out one if it was, we made a decision and there was immediate reaction the other way. I mean,
Yeah.
again, the cost is in the wiring and the layout, so if we think we support it at some point, I think we should move forward with outlaying it and then starting with the crossings, even if it was pedestal, with the exception of the county road. And then if we had complaints that it wasn't good enough, we just work with them to swap it out, and then
Yeah.
it would be, I don't know what, I can confirm, and you know, Jessica can share it with everyone, but right now, the cost of a light is $150, so I don't know if they charge it, you know, I mean, you're talking minimal money, I don't know if they'd have an upcharge on a replacement, I didn't ask Right Hennepin that, but I don't, we can get that info and share it, but I wouldn't suspect it would be a lot.
That's the charge of the light, but what's is there a cost then to the footing that goes in?
They charge $150 for either light, and then they charge $1 for the conduit. So they're really making their money in the long term, you know, lighting charge is how I suspect their model is, because when we bid out a street light, right? So we bid out a street light, say in other communities that operate differently than Right Hennepin and Excel. I worked in New Hope long ago. We would do, or even a street light in a private parking lot, like at City Hall or Public Works. That cost for that light is like $10,000 to $15,000 10 years ago. That you get publicly bid, and so they're basically giving you a light for free. That's their business model, that I'm speculating, so I could be wrong on that. But that's cheap for buying a light. If we know
Until you end up with 5,000 of them across the city, and then it's,
so it's,
You're saying we should have them put the lights in and then take them out? Use those in our parks and other places?
I'm just saying it's a complicated topic. We probably won't win, but if we have that's why we're trying to craft a vision so that we're all on the same page with the decision. So it helps us when you give us some feedback, because we're just trying to accomplish a lot of competing interests, and it's,
Right.
you know, it's subjective. This is a subjective task, and so we can take some of your guidance and incorporate that and reevaluate kind of every street project. And it's my fault that it was late in the game, but next time I'll do it a little earlier. And
Well, this was a good conversation to have. I think, starting points, we discussed the two overheads that we think could be pedestals to start out. And I don't know what we want to do in terms of how often we want to space it. to start?
I would just do the streets and then I would have them, I would just have the.
Fill in as
Ware's
needed.
gonna run through the whole area anyway. It's just a matter of putting in a base and tapping into it. So,
I'd be fine with that. Anyone else?
I just don't want goldenrod to be an overhead. Other than that, I'm okay.
The new Walcott line.
Because we already have two of them down at
Yeah.
101, a block away.
Yeah,
It's a lot
that's
of
true.
light.
There's two.
and you're gonna, it's gonna be, the street's gonna be lit going up. I'm fine with that too.
Do we want to just do the county road crossing as overhead and try everyone else pedestal, so we have some consistency across, and then if there's a specific spot that.
We can always change it.
We try to swap it out. Is that-
I like
Yeah, I
that.
think that works for me.
Less is better.
Sounds good, thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once we buy the light, or is it fully in our control?
You
No,
gotta
they-
power it, so.
No, I mean,
The payment's fully in our control, but other than, if there's if they get hit, they come out and fix it. If the light's out, they come out and service it. So,
well, I mean, so, let's say these all have lenses on them, right? That deflect, they're supposed to deflect so much light down, they're supposed to be,
Yeah.
not so
They-
much.
yeah, there's limitations to the overhead ones on the deflection, because they're
Yeah.
higher. The pedestal ones, I believe, do meet our deflection standards down.
If we wanted to adjust those, would that be within the city's realm, or is that just left to the?
You mean just get the lensing somehow more, the deflection more? We'd have to work with
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, let's say, shade out the top half of the light or something that's facing someone's house because of complaint, is that within the realm of the city to make that decision, or is that left to the?
I think it's within the realm of us to shade something out. We just have to work with them on, could it actually be shaded out, and is there a product that could do it?
Duct tape.
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't think that they
Rust-Oleum.
care, like, if there's a way to black out one side versus the other three, I don't think they would care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put it in mirrored glass on one side.
I feel like Medina, I had a similar conversation with Medina's mayor a while ago about streetlights in relation to what they do in Foxbury Farms. And I thought she mentioned that they do have something like that, so I could try to get some more information on that.
Yeah, they're Excel though. There's probably
True,
more
it
options
could be
down
that.
there.
It could be that.
I mean, I could certainly ask if they have the ability to block out one side of the light.
Sure.
If there's a product that they could, black, one side's black, so it's only lit three ways.
Who replaces the bulbs in our streetlights?
They do.
They do? You call them?
Yeah, they do that all for, for free. The only way we would get charged is if like it was physically damaged by a snowplow and they could prove it, then they could charge us. But
They only have like the online form, and
yeah,
I know we've
yeah,
had
but
people.
we get a
email
lot of
me.
requests actually, and we try to put in a newsletter every once in a while. We get a lot of calls. I know you've gotten
Yep.
calls, but yeah, it's, you can just go online and do it.
And they're usually pretty good.
Typically, they end up calling the city, and we just submit the form for them, just because it's easier. But we do try to notify people how to do it.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you very much. On to, we have, okay, a couple closed sessions, so I will pick one on this. The City Council is going into closed sessions to consider an offer for real estate under the authority of Minnesota Statute 13D, .05, subdivision 3C3. The city is permitted to close a meeting to consider offers and counteroffers for the purchase or sale of real estate or personal property. The city council is going into closed session to consider an offer for real estate on the following properties that are subject to that are the subject of the closed meeting. 10500 Trail Haven Road, 10440 Trail Haven Road, 10405 Trail Haven Road. Upon adjournment of that closed session, the city council is going into another closed session to consider the offer for real estate. The following property will be the subject of the closed meeting. PID 35-11-23-42-0035.
Around me.
Morning stuff.